My fiancé posted, "Never let fear keep you attached to the wrong future," 2 days after canceling our wedding and moving out. I stayed completely silent through every accusation online. Months later, her best friend accidentally revealed the real reason we broke up during a drunken birthday speech nobody expected. "I just think you were holding me back." She said it so quietly I almost missed it. Standing in our kitchen, box of her things already packed by the door, she looked at me like she was waiting for me to agree with her. I didn't say anything. She took my silence as confirmation. "You know it's true," she added, softer now, almost kind. "We wanted different things." I looked at the box. Her favorite mug was on top, the white one with the chipped handle I'd glued back together twice. I remembered the morning I fixed it the second time, how she'd laughed and said, "You fix everything, don't you?" I still didn't say anything. 2 days later, she posted, "Never let fear keep you attached to the wrong future." 412 likes by morning. Comments full of fire emojis and "You deserve this, Queen," and the audacity of some men. I read every single one, and I still didn't say anything. I didn't realize it then, standing in that kitchen, watching the door close behind her, but that moment changed everything. ## Part 2. The wedding was supposed to be in September. Venue booked. Deposits paid. 214 invitations already mailed. She canceled it on a Tuesday. Moved out by Thursday. By Saturday, the cryptic posts had started. It wasn't just that one. There were others, spread across 4 days, each one vaguer and more pointed than the last. Growth requires letting go of the familiar. Then, I chose myself. Finally. Then, the one that landed hardest. Some people don't want you to evolve. They just want you to stay small so they feel comfortable. She never named me. She didn't have to. Our mutual friends were smart enough to read between the lines. A few of them weren't even subtle about it. Marcus, who I'd known since college, posted a comment on her third post that just said, "You were always too good at carrying other people's weight." Her sister replied with 3 clapping emojis. I didn't respond to any of it. People at work started looking at me differently. Not hostile exactly, more like careful. The way people look at someone they're not sure about anymore. My manager, Dana, asked if I was doing okay. I told her I was fine. She nodded in a way that suggested she didn't fully believe me. Elizabeth, I should use her name at least once, had been well-liked. She was warm in the way that photographs well, generous with her attention in public, always the person who remembered birthdays and brought food to potlucks. When the two of us walked into a room together, people lit up for her. That wasn't bitterness. It was just true. So when the story became Elizabeth finally left, nobody questioned the version she offered. I thought staying quiet was the mature thing to do. I told myself that the truth had a way of surfacing eventually, that silence was dignity, that I wasn't going to fight a public relations battle over my own relationship. Those were the things I told myself. But there was one message she didn't know I'd seen. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 31 when this happened. She was 29. We'd been together 4 years, 3 months, and I know because I counted it once, for our anniversary, 11 days. We met at a friend's housewarming in the fall, standing on a balcony because neither of us was particularly good at parties. She was holding a plastic cup she hadn't touched and talking about a documentary she'd seen about migratory birds. I thought she was the most interesting person I'd spoken to in months. We moved in together after 18 months. It felt right in that way that good timing always does. Neither of us pushed for it. It just became obvious. The engagement happened on a Thursday evening, which she'd always found funny. "You proposed on a Thursday," she used to say, laughing. So romantic. It was a joke between us. The ring had belonged to my grandmother. She cried when I told her that. We spent 14 months planning the wedding. It was never a source of tension. We agreed on almost everything. Small guest list, outdoor venue, no assigned seating. The only real disagreement was about the music, and even that we resolved by splitting the playlist. By all visible measures, we were fine. Looking back now, there was one moment that should have registered. About 8 months before the end, I came home early from a work trip. Flight got pushed up. I didn't bother telling her because I wanted to surprise her, and found her sitting on the couch, laptop open, on a video call. She heard the door and closed the laptop before I'd even taken off my shoes. I thought nothing of it. She said it was work. I believed her without checking. The phone thing started small. It had always been face up on tables, on counters, on the nightstand. That was just how she was. She didn't care about notifications, didn't feel the need to hide them. So when it started going face down, I noticed. I didn't say anything. I filed it. Then came the new language. References to things I had no context for. A restaurant she'd been to that she mentioned once, casually, and when I asked when we'd gone she said, "Oh, I went with some people from the design team." Which was fine, except she'd never mentioned going. And when I tried to ask more, there was a brief tightening in her expression, not anger, just something that closed off quickly. Her schedule changed too. Not dramatically. That would have been easier to point to. Instead, it shifted in small ways. Tuesday evenings that used to be ours started filling with things. A fitness class. Drinks with a coworker named Priya. A standing coffee thing she described vaguely as a small group. I asked once if I could come to the Tuesday thing. She said it wasn't really that kind of gathering. I nodded. Filed it. The canceled plans. 3 times in about 6 weeks, we had something on the calendar. Dinner reservation, a drive upstate to visit my parents, tickets to a show I'd bought 3 months in advance, and each time, something came up. She was tired. She had a migraine. Work had gotten heavy and she needed a quiet night. None of it was unreasonable on its own. All of it, stacked, felt like something. Then there was the way she laughed at her phone sometimes. That particular kind of laugh, the one that drops your guard because it's real, not performed. I'd ask what was funny and she'd say just something stupid online without showing me. And I'd look at the ceiling and tell myself I was being paranoid. I want to be clear, I had no proof of anything. Nothing concrete. Just a growing collection of small things that didn't individually mean anything, but it started to feel, when I laid them out in my head, like a shape I couldn't quite name. The emotional distance was the last thing to arrive, but it was the loudest. She stopped reaching for my hand in the car. She started sleeping on her side of the bed with a deliberateness that hadn't been there before. Conversations at dinner became easier but shallower. We talked about the news, about shows we were watching, about nothing that required vulnerability. She was present and far away at the same time. I remember one night watching her read across the room from me and thinking, I cannot tell if we are fine or if I am standing very close to something I haven't seen yet. Then came the laptop. I wasn't snooping. That matters to me, even now. She'd asked me to check if a document she'd been working on had saved correctly. Her printer wasn't connecting. She needed it for a meeting in the morning, and she was in the shower. I opened the laptop, found the document, started printing it. And while the printer ran, the screen went back to the browser tab that had been opened before I navigated away. Her email. Open. Visible. The subject line at the top of the thread read, Thank you for last night. I sat there for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then I scrolled up. The thread was with someone named Daniel. 3 exchanges back and forth. The most recent one, the one I'd seen, was timestamped the previous Thursday, the night she'd said she was at the design team drinks. I read the first 2 lines. Then I stopped, because what I read wasn't what I was bracing for. The thread was about a freelance project. A thank you for a referral she'd passed along. Apparently, Daniel was a web developer she knew professionally, and she'd connected him with a client, and the job had gone well, and he was expressing genuine gratitude. Dinner was just the professional way to close it out, he'd written. Your instinct on that client was spot on. That was it. That was the whole thing. I closed the laptop, sat there with the printed document in my hands, and felt something between relief and embarrassment. Relief that there was nothing there, and a quiet embarrassment at what I'd been imagining. The document printed. She came out of the shower. I handed it to her. She said thank you. I never mentioned the email. But here's the thing. That should have been the moment I walked away from all the suspicion, let it go, stopped filing things, gave her the clean slate she probably deserved. Instead, the relief lasted about 3 days. And then the Tuesday evenings started again. The post that did the most damage was the one she wrote a week after moving out. Some people confuse your patience with weakness, your silence with acceptance, your grace with inability to speak up. I spent years being the bigger person. I'm done being big for people who couldn't see the size of what I was giving. It had over 600 likes. The comments were extraordinary in their confidence, given that nobody except Elizabeth knew what the post was actually about. He never deserved you, wrote someone I'd met exactly twice at a mutual friend's barbecue. The peace you'll feel when you stop carrying someone else's limitations. It's indescribable, wrote Cassie, who had been in our wedding party, and who had hugged me at the venue walkthrough 4 months earlier and said she'd never seen Elizabeth so happy. Cassie unfollowed me 4 days after that post. Then Marcus called, not to check in, to tell me, with the careful tone of someone delivering difficult news, that people were starting to talk and that he thought I should say something. I asked him what he thought I should say. He paused. I don't know, he admitted. But your silence is making it worse. I told him I appreciated the call and that I wasn't going to say anything. He didn't reach out again for 2 months. My mother called from Ohio. She'd seen the posts. My aunt had screenshotted something and sent it through the family group chat, because that is the particular cruelty of family group chats. My mother is not someone who panics easily, but there was a tightness in her voice that told me she was holding something back. Is any of it true? She asked. No, I said. She wanted more than that. I didn't give it to her. You're going to let her say these things and just nothing? For now, I said. She thought I was making a mistake. So did my younger brother, who texted me a paragraph that ended with "You're literally letting her control the story." He wasn't wrong. I knew he wasn't wrong. But every time I sat down to write a response to any of it, the posts, the comments, the people who'd quietly distanced themselves, I couldn't find a version that felt like anything other than defending myself, and defending myself felt like confirming the premise. So I stayed quiet. Every day of silence felt like losing ground. I told myself that was fine. Her name was Rena. She worked in operations at a company in Elizabeth's building. Not the same company, just the same building, and the two of them had coffee occasionally in the lobby cafe because they'd once been stuck in the same elevator during a fire alarm and discovered they had a mutual friend. They were acquaintances, not close. Elizabeth had mentioned her a handful of times over the years. I ran into Rena at the pharmacy about 6 weeks after Elizabeth moved out. We recognized each other, exchanged the kind of small talk you do when you know someone through someone else and aren't sure of the etiquette, and she said she was sorry to hear about everything. Then she said, I always thought you two seemed solid. I remember seeing you together at that thing in March. What thing in March? I asked. The opening. At the gallery on West 22nd. I'm pretty sure I saw you two there. I had been in Chicago in March. A 4-day conference. I had texted Elizabeth photos of the deep dish pizza. She always made fun of me for ordering. She had responded with laughing emojis. I don't think that was me, I said. Rena looked uncertain. Maybe I'm misremembering. It was a while ago. She smiled, said it was good to see me, and left. I stood in the pharmacy aisle for a long time. When I got home, I looked at my phone. Found the texts from the Chicago trip. March 14th through the 17th. I scrolled back to our exchanges from those 4 days. Normal conversation. Affectionate. She'd sent me a picture of the dog we'd been considering adopting. The gallery opening on West 22nd. I didn't know what gallery. I didn't know what opening. But Rena had been sure enough to bring it up unprompted. Sure enough that she'd mentioned it, as though it were a shared fact. I started going back through the months in my head. Not just the small things I'd been filing, the face-down phone, the Tuesday evenings, the canceled plans, but the specific dates. Times when I'd been traveling for work. Times when she'd been less available the days before I left, and then quieter than usual for a day or two after I returned. There had been 6 work trips in the 14 months before the breakup. Longer ones to Chicago and Seattle, and one to Austin where I'd been gone almost a week. I wasn't sure what I was counting, but the timeline suddenly stopped making sense. The actual breakup didn't happen the way she described it to people. I know that because I was there. It was a Sunday evening in early July. We'd had a quiet weekend. No plans, which had been unusual lately, and I'd been cautiously optimistic about that. The way you are when something tense has been holding still for a while. We made dinner together, opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving, and for a few hours it had felt like before, like the early years when we could spend an entire Sunday doing nothing and it was enough. Then she said, I've been thinking a lot lately. I waited. I don't think I can do this anymore. I asked her what she meant by this. Us, she said. The wedding. All of it. I set down my glass. Can you tell me why? She was quiet for a while. Then, I think we've been growing in different directions for a long time. I think I've changed, and I'm not sure we're compatible anymore. I asked her if there was something specific, something that had happened. She said no, that it was more of a feeling, a cumulative thing, that she'd been unhappy for a while and hadn't known how to say it. I asked her if she was seeing someone. She said no. I looked at her for a long moment. There was something in her face that was difficult to read. Not guilt exactly, but not the clean sadness of someone who'd made a hard decision and was at peace with it. There was something else underneath. An alertness, almost. Like she was listening for something. Is there anything you want to tell me? I asked. I told you, she said. I'm not happy. I think this is the right thing. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. That was all I said. She seemed to expect more. An argument, maybe, or grief, or an attempt to negotiate. When none of that came, something shifted in her expression. She asked if I was going to be okay. I said yes. She asked if I had questions. I said not right now. She left that night to stay with her sister. She came back Thursday for her things. What she told people afterward, the version that made it into the posts and the comments and the careful conversations, was that she tried to have an honest conversation with me and I'd been emotionally unavailable. That I'd sat there in silence like a wall. That I'd never fought for us. That she'd been unhappy for years and I'd simply never noticed because I'd been too wrapped up in my own life. The thing I hadn't told anyone, the thing I'd been sitting with for weeks, was this. When she said I don't think I can do this anymore, she'd been holding her phone in her lap, under the table. And at some point during that conversation, while I was looking at her face, I'd heard it vibrate. Twice. And she hadn't looked down. But she'd felt it. I could tell she'd felt it because her hand moved, just slightly, like a reflex she'd caught herself in. I didn't say anything about it then. I'm saying it now. August was quiet. I moved into a smaller apartment, kept the dog, a 3-year-old retriever mix named Biscuit, who seemed confused about the new space but adapted faster than I did. I started running again, something I'd let slide over the years. I got better at cooking actual meals instead of ordering delivery 4 nights a week. Small recalibration. Then in November, I got a text from an old friend named Paul. Hey man, throwing a birthday thing for Jess next Saturday. Nothing big, just dinner at the apartment. Would be great to have you there. Jess was Paul's girlfriend. I liked them both. I'd missed their company over the past several months. I texted back immediately. I'll be there. I didn't know Cassie would also be there. I didn't know what Cassie was going to say. There were about 16 people at Paul's apartment. Dinner first. Pasta, 2 bottles of wine per table section, the warm noise of a room full of people comfortable with each other. I sat next to a guy named Owen who worked in urban planning, and we talked about the BQE reconstruction for 45 minutes, which was exactly the kind of conversation I'd needed without knowing I'd needed it. Cassie was across the room. We'd made eye contact once, brief and careful, and then moved on. At some point, after dessert, 3rd glass of wine into the evening, Paul stood up and clinked his glass and said he wanted to say a few words about Jess. Simple toasts followed. Her mom went first, then her co-worker Maya, then Cassie, who'd been Jess's friend since college. Cassie stood up. She was flushed, had been for a while, visibly, in the way that's unmistakable after a certain number of glasses. She started the way toasts start. Jess, I have watched you become someone so extraordinary. Warm. Generic. Everyone was smiling. Then her eyes moved, involuntarily I think, to me. And something in her face did a strange thing. A flicker, brief, like she'd just remembered something she'd been trying to forget. She looked back at Jess. Continued. And I know this year has been a lot. For everyone. Something in her tone had changed. It was subtle, but the room felt it. That particular shift when a toast starts going somewhere unexpected. I also know, she said, slower now, that sometimes we find out things about people we thought we knew, and she stopped. Laughed, a little too quickly. Sorry. I've had a lot of wine. Laughter from the room. Release. She kept going. I just want to say that I'm glad the truth has a way of coming out, eventually. Because I spent months, I said things, and I believed things, and I didn't. I should have asked more questions. The laughter had faded. The room was quiet now, the way rooms get when something real has started leaking into a space built for celebration. Paul's face had gone very still. I found out in October, Cassie said. Her voice was different now, flatter, almost, from someone who works in her building. That Elizabeth had been seeing someone for almost a year before she ended the engagement. That the gallery opening in March wasn't some random work thing. That the Tuesday evening in September, she'd been direct enough with Cassie, who had apparently come to Rena looking for information, after seeing something online, to confirm what she'd suspected. His name, I found out later, was Garrett. He worked in commercial real estate. They had met the previous fall at a work event, around October, roughly 4 months into our wedding planning. The gallery opening in March had been his idea. The Tuesday evenings had started in January. The trip she'd taken in April to visit an old college friend in Portland. The one I'd helped her pack for. The one where I dropped her at the airport with a coffee I'd picked up from her favorite place. She had not gone to Portland. I did not need all of this information at once. It came in over the following days, from Paul, who had apparently gotten the full account from Jess, who had gotten it from Cassie after the party. He called me the Monday after. He started to apologize. I interrupted him. I know it wasn't your fault. I should have reached out months ago, he said. You didn't know. Marcus knew. Or suspected. I think he... Paul, I said. It's fine. Pause. You knew. Didn't you? He said. Not a question. Not everything. But something. I suspected, I said. I never found proof. And you didn't say anything. No. He was quiet for a moment. Why not? I thought about it. Because saying something would have meant explaining myself, I said. And I didn't want to explain myself. I wanted it to be visible without me having to perform it. Paul didn't say anything for a while. Well, he finally said. I guess it became visible. The architecture of what happened next was quiet and total. Cassie reached out to me directly 2 days after the party. A long message, genuine, undefended, the kind of apology that doesn't make excuses or center itself. She said she'd been wrong, that she'd been an easy audience for a story she hadn't interrogated, that she was sorry for the public comments and for unfollowing me and for treating my silence as confirmation of guilt when it had just been silence. I told her I appreciated it and that I held no hard feelings. I meant both. Over the next few weeks, I noticed the small social realignment. People who had quietly stepped back began quietly returning. An invitation here, a message there. Marcus called. It was a strange conversation. He'd clearly heard enough to know he'd been used as a supporting character in a story he hadn't verified, and there was a stilted quality to his apology that told me he was embarrassed in a way he hadn't fully worked through. I was cordial. I didn't make it harder than it needed to be. I heard, through Paul, that Elizabeth had tried to reach out to Cassie after the party. Cassie hadn't responded. I heard that she'd made her social media private. I heard, third or fourth hand, the way you hear things you've stopped trying to seek out, that Garrett had not left his relationship for her, and that whatever that had been, it had ended sometime in the fall. I don't know if that's true. I'm not the person keeping score. What I know is that I never responded to any of her posts. Never wrote a single public word about what happened. Never called anyone to set the record straight. And somehow, in a Saturday night birthday toast, the record set itself straight anyway. She texted me once. It was in December, late evening, after 10, which told me something about the state she'd been in when she sent it. I heard about what Cassie said at the party. I want you to know that things were more complicated than how it probably sounded. I was in a really dark place last year, and I made choices I'm not proud of. I'm not asking you to understand. I just didn't want you to have a version of this that was only the worst parts of me. I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down on the counter. Not dramatically, not as a statement, just because I didn't have anything to say that night, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I picked it up again an hour later. Read the message a third time. Thought about the Sunday evening in July when she'd sat across from me and told me she wasn't happy and her phone had vibrated in her lap and she hadn't looked down. I thought about the Portland trip, about the gallery opening, about the Tuesdays. I typed, I appreciate you saying that. I sent it. And then I did not respond to the 3 follow-up messages she sent over the next 2 days. Not out of cruelty. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a point I was making. I just had nothing left to say. The version of me who had wanted to fight for it, argue for it, prove something to the room. That person had been standing in our kitchen the day she left, watching the door close, and had chosen silence instead. Somewhere in the months that followed, silence had become the only language I had left for her. Biscuit is asleep on the floor next to me as I write this. It's February. The city is cold. I ran 4 miles this morning before it got light. I don't think about it much anymore. What I think about, occasionally, is this. For months, everyone believed her version of the story. Then one drunk speech destroyed it in less than 60 seconds. I never said a word. I didn't need to.